All right. So the next five chapters in Genesis 42 through 47, I think it's six chapters, but it is telling one story kind of over a period of time. And so I am going to record all these videos. So this is going to be like the Fast and the Furious, and we're going to have part one, two, three, four, five, and six. But I'm going to get it all covered. I'm going to get it all out. So we are going to start in Genesis chapter 42, still first book of the Bible. We are right at the end. Still the first book of the Bible, Genesis chapter 42. We're going to cover the entire chapter. That's verses 1 through 38. And so we left off with Joseph being promoted to second in command in Egypt, just under Pharaoh. And he is put in this position because Pharaoh had a dream. The dream let us know that there was a famine coming to the land, not just Egypt, but everywhere. And this famine was going to be 7 great years, followed by 7 years that are horrible, like absolutely horrible. And that there was a plan. So Joseph was able to present a plan. We're going to store up all this food so that we are covered when this famine hits. There'll be food and storage to cover the land. Because of his position in prison, he was able to get called on by Pharaoh or the king in order to interpret this dream when everyone else failed to. And because of his position in the favor of God and his belief and trust in the Lord, he was uniquely positioned for this. And so as the famine hits, everybody is going into the storehouses in Egypt because they know the food is there. And so we pick up in chapter 42, where Jacob finds out that there is food in Egypt. There is corn in Egypt. And they can take this corn and they're going to cook. They're going to make whatever they need to make. There's millions of possibilities. It'll help them feed the animals that need to be supported. It'll help them feed themselves, their families. And so he rounds up his sons and sends them to Egypt. And so Jacob is Joseph's father. As far as he knows, Joseph was killed many years ago. He doesn't know that he was sold into slavery. He doesn't know that he has kind of had an entire life in Egypt. The brothers remember selling him into slavery, but they don't know what's happened to him. So the last time they saw him, he was 17 years old. And so Jacob tells his sons, like, look, there's food in Egypt. I don't know why y'all sitting here looking around between each other. You're not coming up with any ideas on how to grow food, so let's go purchase some. And so in verse 3, it says Joseph's 10 brothers. There are 12 sons. Only 10 brothers travel. Joseph, of course, is already in Egypt, so there's one. And the other one is Joseph's little brother, Benjamin. And Benjamin is held back. And in verse 4, it says that he's held back so that nothing can happen to him. There's no mischief. There's no accident that's going to happen and take his life, because he is the only son that is remaining from Jacob's relationship with the wife that he has loved and preferred, Rachel. Rachel has passed away. There is no more opportunity for more children, and he is trying to protect what he has left. He once had a wife and 2 sons. He now has a son left. And so he's trying to hold on to this. And so he sends the 10 boys to, men at this point. They're not boys anymore. They are grown men. Everybody is an adult. He sends them to Egypt for food. And they go specifically to Joseph. And in verse 7, when they get there, it says that Joseph recognized him, but he did not allow them to recognize him. So Joseph recognized the brothers. He knew his brothers. He knew they were older adults when he was 17, because they're much older than he is. Well, most of them are much older than he is. So he was aware of what they look like as adults. He was 17, so he looks different. Also, he has lived in Egypt for several decades. He's been there for 21 years, and that's a long time in difference to the way he looked when he was 17. And so now he has taken on an Egyptian identity. He has an Egyptian wife. He has an Egyptian lifestyle. He has lived his entire adult life in Egypt. So he no longer looks like the Hebrew that he was. Now, Egypt is in Africa. These people are black. Hebrews are, of course, black. So they blended in. Hebrew was almost a matter of of design and clothes and culture. And you can sometimes tell the difference between different Black or African American cultures or people from different cultures because of the way they dress and style their hair, because of the accents and the way they speak, the languages that are familiar to them. That's kind of how you can tell people apart sometimes when they look the same. And so what he does is he behaves and presents himself as an Egyptian. He understands the Hebrew language because that's the language that he grew up in, but he's not using it. He's actually speaking through an interpreter as though he doesn't know them or understand them. And so they come to him, and in verse 9 it says, Joseph remembered the dreams that he dreamed of them. God called to his remembrance after 21 years, after having these dreams, after all this time that has passed, he hasn't remembered the dreams that he had. He has interpreted other people's dreams, but he didn't remember his own. Not because he gave up on it or didn't believe it, but because it just wasn't a necessary tool for him. And so sometimes we store stuff away and then we'll see somebody that triggers that memory. And seeing them triggered their memory. Now, when they came, they recognized they are talking to someone who is in leadership and they bow before him. So what he dreamed is actually happening and comes true. So he has a conversation with them and he's like, y'all are spies. Y'all came in here because there's no food anywhere. Y'all came in here to see what it looks like. You think that Egypt over here is starving and you want to make sure you want to come in and see how we're surviving this, because if we don't have food, then maybe our military is weak. If we don't have food, then we don't have the animals that we would normally have, that our country is going to be depleted or weak or open to attack because of this famine. You came in here to spy and see what's going on so you can kind of take advantage of us. Now, again, he knows who they are, and so he's giving them a hard time. And they're like, nope, that's not the case. We came here for food. We came here because we need some help. And we are all brothers. There's 12 of us. One of our brothers is gone, and the other has stayed behind. And Joseph was like, nope, you spies. Because I don't see 12 brothers. I only see 10. Y'all trying to make up these extra people to make it seem like you're credible, but you're not. And so in verse 15, he said, look, I'm not going to let you go because I think you spies. Y'all going to go to prison. I'm going to let y'all sit in the prison. Y'all decide who's going to stay here, because what I want you to do is y'all going to sit in prison. Y'all pick one brother to go back home. Bring the other brother that's missing. You say there's one that's gone, but there's one that stayed at home. If you're telling the truth, y'all stay in prison, send one brother home to bring the one that's behind as proof that you're telling the truth. And so he threw him in prison for 3 days. And so they in prison like, oh my God, what are we going to do? What are we going to do? We done came out here to get food and now we're in prison. So we all have families at home. We got wives and children that are relying on us. There's no food there and we're sitting here in prison and we cannot help them. We cannot assist them. We can't bring them food. So our families are going to die without us. And in verse 18, Joseph says to them, he brings them out of prison and he talks to them. It's been 3 days of them being in prison. He brings them out and he says, do this and you'll live, because I fear God. He is at the present presenting himself to be an Egyptian Egyptians have their own set of gods they worship. He says, I fear God. He didn't say, I fear your God, I fear this God. He didn't use the name. He referenced it specifically, that I fear God, as though there is just the one. Now, for the Hebrews, they know and understand there is just the one. And he says, I fear God. And somehow they didn't pick up on that. It didn't clue them in to the fact that this is a person who may know and understand their God. Therefore, know and understand their culture, their religion, their lifestyle. And he said, if you're true, just let one brother stay behind. The rest of you all go. And so, and y'all are going to go and, of course, go get the brother and bring him back as proof. So instead of keeping all of you all and sending one, I'm going to send everybody and keep one behind. And so they all got together and there is a conversation about who's going to stay behind. And they're like, look, this is our fault. The reason why we're dealing with this, the reason this is God getting his lick back for us treating Joseph the way that we did. This right here is the punishment that we've been waiting our entire lives to come. And they are terrified because they know their father is not letting Benjamin go. And they're like, oh my God, like, who's going to stay behind? Because whoever stays behind, honestly, is going to be the person that gets killed, because they know that Jacob is not going to let his precious Benjamin go. And then now he has lost his wife and the 2 sons. Like, they know that that's not going to happen. So they're like, all right, what are we going to do? And Reuben, sorry, I don't know how that came out, but Reuben was like, look, you know exactly what this is. We're guilty. This is why I said leave him alone. This is why I said don't kill him. This is why I said don't participate in this. This is why I told you that, because I knew it was going to come back on us. We have a responsibility to our brothers, and we didn't take care of him. And so now there is a requirement for his blood. You don't get to take a life and just move on with yours and everything's cool. There is a requirement. There is a retribution. There is a redemption price for what we did. And so Joseph hears the conversation. They know that they're talking about him. He sees and understands and feels their guilt. He sees and understands and knows that they are feeling some type of way about what happened. And so he turned away, and it says he wept. Weeping is like another stage of crying. That is not just, man, they really do care about me. It's not that. Like, he was distraught, because what we can very clearly imagine is if your brother sold you into slavery, if you spent your entire life, he left at 17, he's 38. And his entire life he has spent literally as a slave, several years in prison, never really being able to own or have or do, and always being underneath somebody else. He had a good deal of anger or hurt, guilt. Like, he was angry with them because they ruined his life. They took him away from his family. They sold him into slavery. They heard him begging for them to save his life as they were selling him off. They heard him crying out to be saved when he was stuck in that pit, and they didn't respond to him. And he had anger. I'm certain that he had some anger in his heart. And sitting in prison, knowing that I didn't do anything, and the only reason why I'm here is because of them, is a hard thing. And sometimes you got to forgive people who have not apologized. Sometimes you got to forgive people who really aren't sorry. They upset now, and they feel guilt, but they're not apologetic. They're not sorry. They're like, man, we really did this, and now we're getting in trouble. They're being punished. They are recognizing that there is a punishment for what they've done, but they're not sorry. They're not apologetic. And so he understands he has to accept and forgive people who are not sorry. They feel guilty, but they're not apologetic. And so he takes Simeon and was like, you, sir, you come on. You come on. And you be the one that stays here until they come back. So what he does in verse 25 is he tells them, go ahead, fill up their sacks with corn. And so they're filling up the sacks with corn, and they pay for it. So they had these big kind of duffel bags that they attach to the donkeys that they're riding on, and they purchase food. They are purchasing this. This is not a gift. It's not given to them. They are purchasing it. So they pay their money. They give them a sack. If they say it's going to be 10 gold coins, they give them a sack with 10 gold coins in it. And what we see is after they leave, they get the corn, it's loaded up, and as they travel on their way back home, in their mind brainstorming how they're going to get Benjamin out the house so they can get Simon back, or Simeon back. I like saying Simeon, that's why I use it that way. But they are brainstorming and thinking about it. They stop to rest, and when they rest, one of the brothers opens his sack of corn to feed the animals, and he sees his money in there. He's like, oh my God, my money is in my bag. I know I paid this, and the money is in the bag. And they're afraid now because they're like, look, they have our brother. They're asking us to come back with the other brother who we probably are not going to be able to bring back. We're not going to be able to survive forever off the food that we have. We're going to have to go back at some point. And now we have our money, so we look like thieves. We look like thieves. We look like we stole back the money that we were supposed to pay for this. They didn't gave us a refund by accident instead of charging us. And they are afraid. How do I go home and tell my father this? And so in verse 29, they get home. And they report everything that happened. They're like, hey, we went there. We saw this man. He put us in jail for 3 days because he called us spies. We explained who we were. And we told him that we had 12 sons of this one man who came. The only reason why you see 10 people instead of 12 is because one of our brothers is gone. And the other brother is at home with our father. And he said, we got to leave one brother behind. So that's why Simeon didn't come back. And on top of that, in order to get Simeon back, we have to show up with Benjamin. And then he put our money back in the sack. So we have money here. And the money is in every individual brother's sack. Everything, every purchase price for the amount of corn that they have is in the bag. So they at no point have paid for anything that they have. And they are panicking. Like, now we got to go back and explain to him that we're not spies. We're not thieves. We need our brother back, but we don't have the other brother. So they are like really in a really bad position and they don't know what to do. And so Jacob gets sad. Jacob now is facing the idea that I have to turn over the son that I love, the one I have left, the babiest of my boys, and send him out and hope that nothing happens to him, given that we are in this situation. And he is heavy-hearted. We're going to say that. He is heavy-hearted. It is not something that he can just very easily say, oh, go ahead. You know, I see y'all when y'all get back. It's all right. No problem. That's cool. Get your brother back. He is recognizing that anything can happen. I sent my sons and they just spent 3 days in prison. What's to say that if I send Benjamin, nothing's going to happen? He said, look, if something happens to him, I'm literally going to just go down into my grave in mourning. I've spent all these years mourning my son Joseph and mourning my wife Rachel, and now you want me to continue and go deeper and deeper. He said, at this point, I'm just gonna die. I'm just gonna go down into my grave. You or this right here would be the straw that breaks the camel's back. I'm gonna just go down into the grave in mourning. I'll never get up from this depression. I'll never get up from this space of where I am. And Reuben, because he's the oldest, said, look, if I take Benjamin and I do not return with him, you can kill my 2 sons and I'll understand. I'll sit in the same place of grief with you because you've lost 2 sons and I would lose 2. He said, I promise you on the life of my sons. I promise you on the life of my legacy. I promise you on the life of the future of my family. I promise you that if you, for any reason, don't get back the 1 son, you can have my 2. Now, Reuben is the oldest, so he carries the birthright, he carries the blessing, he carries all the things on him. He is the first son. His sons would then be the first of the grandchildren. So what he's saying is literally, I'm giving you back more than what you're losing. I know it feels like it's not because those are your kids, but I'm literally telling you to take out the legacy that you've created. I'm saying stop. Like this right here would affect the future of their families. This right here is a major, major thing. And he's just not ready to deal with it. So he just goes and sits and is off to himself and planning to live out this depression. Okay. So we're going to recap part 1 of Joseph and his brothers. So the famine gets really, really tough. and they go into Egypt. Jacob sends his 10 sons. He holds back Benjamin. They get all the way there. They see Joseph. They don't know it's Joseph, but Joseph knows it's them. And so he accuses them of being spies, throws them in jail for 3 days. Got a little get back. Just a little bit get back. From the time that he spent in prison, the time that he spent in the pit, the time that he spent being accused of something that he hadn't done. Got to slick back a little bit. And so at the end of this time, he's like, look, I'm going to send all of you back to get through one brother. Here's the proof. This is how you vindicate yourself. I'm going to keep back one of your brothers. I'm going to keep back one guy, and I'm going to send the rest home so y'all can get the one brother that didn't come with you to prove the story that you told me. In effect, Joseph just wants to see his family. They don't know it's him, so he is just going on with the thing. And they are having this huddle about who is going to be responsible. And they are going to talk amongst themselves, and he overhears the conversation. And this conversation is where he understands that they know what they did. They know what's going on, and they are feeling guilty, even if they're not sorry about it. And so what they do from there is Simeon stays, they go home, they get their food. And when they get home and they realize that they have all the money they paid for this in the bank and in their bags, Okay, so, sorry. So they have all their money in the bag and they are panicking. They go to their father, Jacob, and was like, look, Simeon had to stay in jail. That's the only way we got to come back home. We got to bring Benjamin with us. And in this time, somehow, we got all the food that we purchased, but they put all our money back in it. So now we got a whole, we got a battle that we're not spies and thieves. So we really got to do this. And Jacob is prepared to literally live out his last days in depression and misery and grief for what he feels he's lost. So what I want us to remember and take away from this, one, sometimes you're going to have to allow people to be forgiven. You're going to have to forgive people who are not sorry. They may feel guilty. They may feel bad about what they did, but they're not actually apologetic. And you have to forgive them anyways. You have to forgive them anyways. You got to let it go. When you have an opportunity to get back, give them God. Give them the best parts of you. Give them opportunities to make it right. Do not take the get back. Leave that option out. Then understand and trust God no matter what the circumstance is, no matter what is going on, because this moment, Jacob is weak. He is tired. He is prepared to literally sit down on his life because he lost something. He lost a wife and a son. He has 4 wives. There are still 3 left. He has 12 sons. There are still 11 left, and a daughter. So he is prepared to give up his whole life for 2 people that he lost. 2 people that he lost. He was prepared to throw away literally 15 people. And we have to understand sometimes when God takes things from us, there is a healing journey that we need to walk through that helps us to trust each other more. His name was changed to Israel a long time ago. A long time ago. And now he is still walking in Jacob. Do not pick up that old man. Do not pick up who you used to be. Do not allow that to become your identity again. Walk in the newness of Christ. Walk in the newness of your salvation. Walk in that new that God gave you. Do not go back and be who you used to be. Do not be that person who was beaten down by life. Do not go back and be that person who is unsure and uncertain of themselves. Do not go back. Even when it tries to get you, even when it meets you at your door, you need to give it God. And that's what he didn't do. And we want to take this example and learn as an opportunity to make sure we are doing that. Walk this thing out in the newness of Christ. Y'all be blessed.